Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again here at the Axe Online. I trust you've had a great week again. Definitely been a good week for me. I finally got a haircut, so no more curls on the side and curls up on top. So getting back to a little bit of normalcy there. Been an exciting week for Maranatha, as this Sunday will be our first Sunday back meeting on the property. And as of right now, we are up to 4 services that we'll be having Sunday morning. Obviously, having about half capacity, and making sure we still maintain social distancing, staying healthy, being smart about opening things back up. So hopefully you've been able to join one of those services Sunday morning. And then, as I mentioned last week, where Yak videos will be streaming at 6 o'clock on Sunday nights when we do our normal Sunday evening service. So we'll still be doing these online videos. Definitely keep watching. If you can't join Sunday night at 6, watch it when you can. Pull it up on YouTube, pull it up on the church website. But definitely just keep being a part of Maranatha and what God's doing through Pastor Lopez and through the ministry as a whole. So we're going to get into another topic today that I think is very relevant, and oftentimes some aspects of this are very much overlooked when it comes to our Christian lives, and that's being unequally yoked. And yeah, I think when we hear messages, we hear sermons about being unequally yoked, very often we're talking about marriage, and rightfully so. We definitely need to be careful about who we're getting involved with as far as the opposite sex and the dating relationships, marriage relationships that we're in. But I think the passage of scripture, 2 Corinthians 6, it goes well beyond just marriage. There's no specific context of that passage talking about just marriage. So we're going to talk about that some today. And as always, before we get started with the lesson, let's go and have a word of prayer, and then we'll jump right in. Father, again, we love you. Thank you for just keeping us healthy, keeping me healthy, my family, and Father, all those around me. You continue to provide health and safety for us, and just thank you so much for that. And Father, I pray that you will continue to bless Maranatha as we're opening back up. I know you've blessed in a mighty way while we've been doing these series online, pastors preaching online. People are still getting saved. People are getting baptized. It's just awesome to see how you've worked through such a hard time for our country, for our world as a whole. But yet, Father, if we keep our focus on you, you've shown you can still do great and mighty things. So we thank you for that. And God, as we get into what it means to be unequally yoked, getting into your word again here with this lesson, I pray that you will just show us relationships that we have where we might be unequally yoked and how that's hindering our Christian growth and our walk with you. But God, just show us as only you can how we need to take steps to be equally yoked, to make sure we are getting everything out of our Christian life, out of our walk with you that we can. We love you. In your prayer, amen. So I said, I'll start by reading 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Very common passage whenever you talk about being unequally yoked. And again, this applies to really all relationships that we're in. But 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 17, it says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship with righteousness hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." So again, this passage, it doesn't say anything about marriage. It's talking about a lot of different relationships. Unequal simply means not equal size, quantity, or value. It's not about judging anyone. It's not about being better than anyone, but being unequally yoked. And again, if you've heard any kind of message on this, you understand what being yoked together means. But basically, a farmer will take two cows, two oxen, and they'll put a beam across them, a yoke, across them so they can work in tandem. You will never see an ox with a horse. Two very powerful animals, two very strong animals, but they serve different purposes. A horse is going to be much faster, it's taller, it's just going to move faster. An ox is just slow and steady and strong. If you put even two oxen together, one is stronger than the other, one is older, more mature, can move faster, and the other one is just kind of dragging it, it's not going to be a straight line. That yoke is not going to be effective. So the farmer's got to pair two equal oxen together to get the most benefit out of this. You can't use just one. We've talked about a lot of different topics, loneliness and friendship. God doesn't want us to be alone in life. That's not how he designed us. It's the same thing with this principle of being equally yoked. Farmers don't use one ox. You aren't going to get the production out of one ox as you will if you use two. They're just going to support each other and help each other and work together. And it's the same in our Christian lives. No matter what the relationship is, you've got to be equally yoked with other believers to get the full benefit and the full help that we need. So I want to talk about marriage. Like I said, if you've heard a message on being equally yoked, you've probably heard it talked about marriage. And obviously there's a lot of truth in that, a lot of value in that. So I want to start with talking about being equally yoked within the marriage. This class is designed for singles. That's who we are. My wife and I are the only married people in the class. So I know there's going to be a lot of people watching this that hopefully this will apply to at some point in time in your life. I also know there are other people who are married watching this, but there's a lot of principles, a lot of things that you need to really consider as far as being equally yoked within marriage. And the first one that I wrote down is spiritual maturity. You've got to be on the same page spiritually with your spouse, with a potential partner. Don't settle for anything. We've got some folks in our class who are a little bit older. I know there's a lot of people who wish they were married. They've been in serious relationships. Things didn't work out for whatever reason. God's got something planned for you. God's got the right person planned. Don't settle for something that may or may not work. Just keep waiting for God to bring that right person in. But a couple aspects to this. Men are to be the spiritual leader. A woman looking for a man, look for a man who can spiritually lead you in the right direction. A couple things to look for as far as that goes. Is he teachable? Is he someone who can take instruction, can take guidance from church, from those he surrounds himself with, from a Christian standpoint? Is he somebody that can receive direction and then hopefully pass that direction on? You've got to find that spiritual leader who's teachable, who's moldable. If maybe you're with somebody who's a new Christian, maybe you're a new Christian looking for a new Christian, or maybe you're watching this video, you're already in a relationship, you're already married. Maybe you got saved after you were married. Any number of circumstances surrounding by this. But one thing you can look for with a spouse who maybe is not a mature Christian, do you see tangible signs of spiritual growth? And again, that could come in a lot of different forms, but those are some things that a woman should be looking for in a potential spouse and a potential mate. In her man, as far as being a spiritual leader, you need to have somebody who can lead you spiritually. And the flip side of that, women are to be spiritually submissive. And obviously in today's society, neither one of these tend to be the case, right? Men are not supposed to be leaders. Women are not supposed to be submissive. We're supposed to be equals. But the fact is, the Bible teaches men are to be leaders when it comes to spiritual matters, and women are to be submissive. So women, look for a leader, a spiritual leader for your spouse. Men, look for a spiritually submissive wife. And there's a lot of principles that go on both sides. That's another whole conversation, another whole message that we're not getting into today. But those are areas that you need to look for as far as being equally yoked. Is your potential mate on the same spiritual maturity level that you are, or will they be there? Are they working towards that? So a huge importance as far as being equally yoked is spiritual maturity. What about your values? Different values, and again, values can cover a lot of different things, but specifically as it applies to spiritual matters, what are your church values? Do you value going to church? Do you value going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, visitation? There's just a lot of activity happening, especially at Maranatha. But maybe you don't go to Maranatha. Maybe you go to another church somewhere else. What are your church values? Are you there every time the church opens the doors? Are you there for revival services, for missions conferences, for any number of things? You need to find a mate who is equally yoked, who values the importance of church. You know, if you believe you should be at church 2, 3, 4 times a week, however many times your options are, you're not going to be successful with somebody who's comfortable going to church only on Sunday mornings. Check it off the box. Church attendance is important, but just check it off the box on a Sunday morning. We did it. Now we can go do something else Sunday night, Wednesday night. It's not going to work if you value church attendance more than your spouse. So that church values, got to be on point with that. Different spiritual values when it comes to devotions, when it comes to prayer time. You know, if you're in a dating relationship or you're married, what does your spouse do when you want to pray with them? Do they just kind of blow you off? It's not important to them to spend time in devotions, to spend time in prayer. That's part of being equally yoked. You've got to be on point, on the same page when it comes to your spiritual values. Another aspect of it is different purposes. What's our purpose here on earth? I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up with both my parents teaching at Christian schools. My whole life growing up was spent in ministry. Now I've chosen a different path for myself. You know, I'm not in ministry as far as a full-time position goes, but very involved in ministry, you know, across the board. Obviously, you know, teaching this class, but a lot of different aspects that I'm involved with church. But what's our purpose? Our purpose as a believer is Christian service. It's to honor God, to glorify God. You've got to find somebody who's on the same page when it comes to honor and glorifying God, somebody who wants to serve with you. My wife and I are on the same page with the Yaks group. You know, it's something that God put on both of our hearts years ago. This stage of life that we're in, it's an important life stage. There's a lot of aspects that, you know, people leaving their homes, leaving the rule of mom and dad, the authority, the figures that they have, branching out onto their own, and it's such an easy time for people to fall away from God. The stats show 80+% of young people who leave home, who hit this stage, the young adult stage, college age, getting in your career started, fall away from church, fall away from God. And so God put it on our heart years ago, hey, I want you to help out with these people. So my wife and I were on the same page with this. If you are with somebody who values anything above Christian service, you're not equally yoked. If you want to serve in church and your spouse, your potential mate, wants to go to the lake, you've got different values. Your purpose is different. Whatever you truly value, whatever you feel your purpose is, that's what you're going to dedicate your resources to. So if you're not on the same page when it comes to Christian service, your resources are going to be split. Your attitudes are going to be split. You're not going to be on the same page. So those are a few things as far as it relates to marriage, why it's so important to be equally yoked within marriage. But where do we go beyond marriage? You know, the Bible doesn't say, be not unequally yoked with unbelievers in the marriage. It just simply says, be not unequally yoked. And some of the examples it says, you know, what communion hath light with darkness? What concord hath Christ with Belial? What part hath he that believeth with an infidel? What agreement hath the temple of God with idols? There's a lot of things here, just contradictions. God doesn't go with Satan. It just doesn't. The temple of God doesn't go with the temple of idols. The light, darkness, that's how God views this. Christians, non-Christians, non-believers, it's across the board. So let's talk about your friendships. You know, be not unequally yoked in your friendships. What does that mean? You know, who you hang out with will mold you. It will shape you. 1 Corinthians 15 and 33, verse 33 says, bad company corrupts good morals or good character. That's my paraphrase of it. But uh, bad company is going to corrupt the good. It is very rare that you will be with somebody, be close with an unbeliever, and you will convert them to Christianity. It happens so much more often the other way around. You live for God, you love God, you want to do what's right, but you hang out with the wrong people, they're going to pull you their way. It happens so much more often. I've heard that a lot of times, that I'm going to draw them to God. I'm going to date this person, and I'm going to bring them into the church, and it does happen, but it's rare. If that's your plan, you're unequally yoked. You're going against what the Bible says. But when it comes to your friendships, if your close friends are non-believers, they're gonna pull you away to do things you shouldn't be doing. Don't be unequally yoked when it comes to your friendships. The Bible has so many verses that talk about friends, about being friends with the wise. Proverbs 13 and verse 20, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. And again, another conversation of how to pick the right friends, things like that, but don't be unequally yoked when it comes to your friendships. Some questions to consider, some things to ask yourself when it comes to your friendship, with your friendships. Do your friends uplift you spiritually? Do your friends encourage you in the Lord? Do they want to make you do what's right? Or do they pull you into sin more often? It's so easy to hang out with friends. It's hard to walk away from friendships. And if you've had to do that, if you've got good friendships and you know you need to break that yoke with them, it's not easy to do. It's hard to say, I can't be friends with you until we figure this out, until I can have better control over myself. Again, it goes back to the boundaries lesson that we were talking about before this quarantine happened. But if your friends are not encouraging you in the Lord, encouraging you to do the right things, you are unequally yoked. Make sure your friendships, they have these same values. And the flip side of that, what kind of friend are you? Are you the one hindering any of your friends? Don't be that person that's the lesser when it comes to being equally yoked. Make sure you are encouraging your friends. Make sure you are encouraging them to do the right things. Don't be pulling them into your sin. Man, you need to be encouraging them to do what's right. Don't be unequally yoked when it comes to your friendships. What about in business relationships? This is something I've seen a lot of situations in business. I've heard that a Christian should never work for a non-believer, in terms of employee-employer relationship. And personally, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's very hard to find companies that fit that mold. And honestly, I believe Christians should be in not every, but most industries. My wife is a nurse. We need Christians in nursing. I've been in accounting and finance. I've been in recruiting for the last 15 years. We need Christians in all these areas. It doesn't matter what it is. You need Christians in those areas. And politics is a big one. There's a lot of very strong believers in politics, but you need Christians in all walks of life, in all industries. So I don't believe in any way that a Christian can't work for a non-believer. I don't believe that's what we're talking about here. But if that relationship, if your employer is causing you to sin, if they are requiring you to do things that go against God, against the Bible, okay, now we have something to talk about. Now you're unequally yoked with an unbeliever. But even more so than that, I think more in like a business ownership type relationship, a business partnership, so to speak. My last employer, before I've been working for myself for 3 years, there were two guys that started a company. And one guy was a very strong Christian. I saw him reading his Bible in the office. I know for a fact he would go to everybody's desk. He would come in early and go to each person's desk that worked in our office and pray for that person individually, pray for him to just be a good example for these individuals. The other business owner he's just a bad guy. I've learned a lot of things about him. There's a reason why I left that company 3 years ago. He's just a bad guy. He's not trustworthy. He's very immoral. Just so many things. You have to go into detail about that, but they were unequally yoked, and it turned out bad for the strong Christian, the strong believer in that relationship. He ended up leaving the company that he worked so hard to start because they didn't get along. They were unequally yoked, and I saw firsthand the impact that had on the business. And this guy had to walk away from the business. He sold his shares of the business, and it had to be away from that industry for a couple of years. But it was just a bad situation, and that's something to think about in the future when you are, maybe you're looking at starting your own business. I know there's one or two folks in our class that are trying to start their own business, but maybe in the future that's something that a lot of times we don't think about. But who are you going into business with? If it's going to be a tight relationship where you're working close knit with somebody in that business, make sure you're equally yoked in those relationships. What about relationships with other Christians? And this is one that kind of be stepping on some toes, but just because somebody is a believer, you hear a lot of things in these relationships. Don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. But what if somebody is a believer? Can you be unequally yoked with a Christian? And absolutely you can. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 11 specifically, but 1 Corinthians 15, Paul is cautioning some of the believers who are fellowshipping with Christians who are practicing in immorality, who are worshiping other idols, they're Christians, they still go to this church, but they have their faith is in other things as well. In 1 Corinthians 15, you can read that. The Bible talks about that. Paul is talking about don't be unequally yoked with other Christians even. And go back to the section on your friendships. I'd say look at your Christian friends. Are they uplifting you spiritually? Are they encouraging you in the Lord? Do your Christian friends encourage you to do what you know is right, or do they pull you into sin? Vice versa. Again, if you're a believer, what impact are you having on your friends? Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're not unequally yoked in other Christian relationships. So that's another aspect to really think about. Don't just go by the fact that, yep, they go to my church, they're in this class, I've grown up with them. It doesn't mean anything. Don't be unequally yoked with other believers even. And I'm constantly drawn to a situation for me growing up when it comes to friends. I had several friends growing up, but my friends in high school that really helped mold and shape me into who I am today. I can't remember a time with either of these guys that either one of them said, hey, let's go do this. Let's go do something we know we're not supposed to do. Little things here and there that I know my parents didn't approve of, and I would go to watch a movie, things like that. And yes, it's wrong. I'm disobeying, things like that. But there was nothing that I remember my friends trying to entice me in as far as, alcohol, drugs, smoking, immorality, just any of these things that I was drawn into because of my friends. But the flip side of that, my brother, his best friend was actually our pastor's son. And I know PKs have, reputations, MKs, missionary kids, all these things that you hear about. But my brother's best friend was the pastor's son. And his friend pulled him into a lot of things that Christians have no business being a part of. And not to go into detail of a lot of that, but I saw the impact that the pastor's son, a Christian, obviously I don't know his heart. Nobody knows his heart except God and this individual. But I saw him pull my brother into a lot of things that they had no business doing. So I've seen this firsthand, the impact a friend can have, but even a Christian friend can have such a negative impact on you. You absolutely can be unequally yoked with other believers. So don't get sucked into the phrase of being unequally yoked with unbelievers, because it's not just that. Don't be unequally yoked with anybody. Whoever you're close with, whoever your friends are, whoever those relationships are, make sure you're on point. Make sure you're encouraging each other in God. Make sure you're encouraging each other to do the right things. Don't be unequally yoked in any of these relationships. So hopefully some things that maybe you haven't thought about, some things that maybe just kind of get glanced over when you hear messages on being unequally yoked. If you have any questions, as I say almost every week, reach out, let me know. I can give you some more verses that can help with this. Give you some other resources that kind of tie into some of these things that we're talking about. But make sure you're on point. Let God, again, guide and direct you. God's the one putting the yoke on you. Make sure you're latching on to somebody else. Let God guide and direct. Just lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Be equally yoked with believers, with other Christians. It's going to make life so much easier. Let's pray. Father, we love you. And again, God, you know the importance of friends. You know the importance of relationships. You gave us the need to have relationships in our life. And you cautioned so many times about having the right friends, about marrying the right person, about even the church that we're in. Father, the pastor that we have, just so many different aspects of being equally yoked and not being unequally yoked with unbelievers, but even with other Christians. God, give us wisdom, give us guidance when it comes to all of our relationships. Help us to make those right decisions. And Father, even those hard decisions, if we are currently unequally yoked with somebody, it might be hard, it might be tough. But God, give us the courage to stand up and do what we need to do in those relationships, whether it be end the relationship altogether or take a step back from that relationship. God, help us to be equally yoked with believers, with Christians. We love you, and just in your name I pray. Amen. So again, just something that hopefully beneficial to you, maybe some things that you haven't thought about. So hopefully there's something that you can take away from this. But like I said, we're back at Maranatha on Sunday mornings. Maybe you didn't get a chance to attend the services this Sunday, but this is what we'll be doing for the foreseeable future. We'll continue to have multiple services. Sign up online, maranathapeoria.org, and go out there. There'll be lists for our services. Sign up for one. The first service is for 65 and older, and just kind of the high risk people attending the first service, but then several services beyond that. And I have no doubt if we fill up a fourth service, Pastor would have a fifth service. Well, he'll have as many services as we need to make sure everybody gets in that wants to be going to church. So go online, sign up for these services, make sure you're attending. And if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. And hopefully we'll see you guys here soon at services. Take care.